October is here, and that means spooky season. Here at ICS, we put together a list of must-see horror films for all you up-and-coming filmmakers. These picks stand out for their writing, direction, iconic visuals, music, and brilliant low-budget filmmaking. There's no ranking, just pure inspiration. I'm your host, Christina Carmona. Let's get started. For our first film, we head back to 1981 for The Evil Dead, directed by Sam Raimi. Shot in a remote cabin in Tennessee on a $90,000 budget, the cast and crew actually lived on set. Before shooting the feature, Raimi and Bruce Campbell shot a proof-of-concept short film called Within the Woods, which they raised $1,600 for, a concept used by many indie filmmakers today. To create that iconic demon cam shot, they strapped the camera to a plank and ran through the woods, later even mounting it to a bike as they rode it through the cabin, nearly crashing into Bruce Campbell. Now, if you would like to see Within the Woods, you can find it on YouTube. For our next film, we travel back in time to 1968 for the film that started the modern-day zombie craze, Night of the Living Dead, directed by the father of zombie films, George A. Romero. Principal photography took place mainly on location in Evans City, Pennsylvania, with Romero using guerrilla-style filmmaking techniques he had honed. Shot on a $100,000 budget, the crew rented a condemned farmhouse to destroy during the course of filmmaking. Props and special effects were simple and limited by the budget. The blood, for example, was Bosco chocolate syrup dribbled over cast members' bodies. The human flesh consumed by ghouls consisted of meat donated by an investor's butcher shop. Zombie makeup varied during the film. Initially, makeup was limited to white skin with blackened eyes. The lead role was initially written for a white actor, but upon casting a black actor, Dwayne Jones, Romero intentionally did not alter the script to reflect this. The film appeared in theaters at a time when very few black actors played leading roles. For our next film, we travel back to 1978 for the film Halloween, which some credit for the start of the 80s horror renaissance. Directed by John Carpenter and shot on a budget of $300,000, and becoming one of the most profitable independent films of all time. Primarily praised for Carpenter's direction and score, many critics credit the film as the first in a long time of slasher films inspired by Psycho. It is also known as the least bloodiest slasher film ever shot, as John Carpenter relied on sound and camera trickery for all of his horror visuals. Carpenter also did the score, and he was told that the film wasn't scary after doing a test screening. Instead of utilizing a more traditional symphonic soundtrack, the film score consists of primarily a piano melody. Following the film's critical and commercial success, the Halloween theme became a huge recognizable part from the film. Our next film is from the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, and of course, it's the 1960s Psycho. Psycho was seen as a departure from Hitchcock's previous film, as it was filmed on a small budget in black and white by the crew of his television series. Initially, the film divided critics due to its controversial subject matter, but audience interest and outstanding box office returns prompted a major critical reevaluation. Psycho is now considered one of Hitchcock's best films and is arguably his most famous and influential work. It has been hailed as a major work of cinematic art by international film critics and scholars who praise its slick direction, tense atmosphere, and impressive camera work, memorable score, and iconic performances. Speaking of performances, Janet Leigh, who plays Marion Crane, is the mother of Jamie Lee Curtis, who was the star of Halloween, which we previously mentioned. Psycho would go on to earn $50 million at the box office, silencing all of Alfred's critics. Imagine being a director, frustrated and reading book after book, trying to find a commercially viable project. Then finding that perfect book from a successful writer only to finish the film and have the writer hate it. This is what happened with Stanley Kubrick's 1980s film, The Shining, and of course, the writer was Stephen King. Produced and directed by Stanley Kubrick and co-written with novelist Diane Johnson, the film is based on Stephen King's 1977 novel and stars Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. Production took place almost exclusively in England at EMI Elstree Studios, with sets based on real locations. Kubrick often worked with a small crew, which allowed him to do many takes, sometimes to the exhaustion of the actors and staff. The then-new Steadicam mount was used to shoot several scenes, giving the film an innovative and immersive look and feel. Now, the famous ending photograph is a real picture, identified on screen as a July 4th ball at the Overlook Hotel in 1921. The real event depicted was a Valentine's Day dance at the Empress Rooms of the Royal Palace Hotel in Kensington, London. Jack Nicholson's face was airbrushed over that of John Goldman. And the rest is history with that iconic ending. Now, what makes a good horror movie? What makes that story scary? Is it the location, the atmosphere, the characters, or how about the suspense built through sound and pacing? The answer is all of the above. However, the horror films that do stand out are the ones that take something that is a universal fear and bring it out to perfection. That film, Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg, based on the 1974 novel by Peter Benchley. It stars Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw. The film caused people to stop going to the beach and made overhunting of sharks a dangerous situation. The production of Jaws is just as famous as the movie itself, and if you haven't yet watched all the behind the scenes on the making of Jaws, we highly suggest that you do. Music was another big factor, and John Williams, the film's composer, scored the main shark theme, with a simple alternating pattern of two notes becoming a classic piece of suspense music, synonymous with approaching danger. Williams described this theme as grinding away at you, just as a shark would do, instinctual, relentless, and unstoppable. Our next film, no studio wanted it. No actors wanted to play a role, and directors passed on the film saying it was too violent. This film went on to win Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actress, Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Picture. In fact, it remains the only horror film to have won Best Picture. Of course, we're talking about the 1991 film The Silence of the Lambs, directed by Jonathan Demme, and stars Jodie Foster, Ted Levin, Scott Glenn, Anthony Harold, and Sir Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. Released on February 14, 1991, the film was a sleeper hit, grossing $272.7 million worldwide on a $19 million budget. The Silence of the Lambs is regularly cited by critics, film directors, and audiences as one of the greatest and most influential films. One of Jonathan Demme's directing style was to have a character talking directly to the camera. When characters are talking to Starling, Jodie Foster, they often talk directly to the camera. When she is talking to them, she's always looking slightly off camera. Director Jonathan Demme has explained that this was done so as the audience would directly experience her point of view, but not theirs, hence encouraging the audience to readily identify with her, something that made many of the audience feel uneasy when watching this film. This next film did the same thing that Jaws did and tapped into a universal fear of nightmares. We all have them, and we've all heard that if you die in a dream, you die in real life. Writer and director Wes Craven gave that nightmare a face in the body of Freddy Krueger in the 1984 film A Nightmare on Elm Street. The film is credited with carrying on many tropes found in low-budget horror films of the 1970s and 80s, originating in John Carpenter's Halloween. A Nightmare on Elm Street contains many biographical elements with director Wes Craven's childhood, which is something that makes many of the characters feel more real. The film's villain, Freddy Krueger, is drawn from Craven's early life. One night, a young Craven saw an elderly man walking on the side path outside the window of his home. The man stopped to glance at a startled Craven and walked off. This served as the inspiration for Krueger. By Craven's account, his own adolescent experiences led him to the name Freddy Krueger, as he had been bullied at school by a child named Fred Krueger. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains lists Freddy Krueger at number 40. Our next film is a remake from a 1951 film called The Thing from Another World. Director John Carpenter was approached by his friend Stuart Cohen about the project in 1976, now only called The Thing. Carpenter was reluctant to join the project as he thought the adaptation would be too difficult to surpass, although he was impressed with the film's monster. Cohen suggested that he read the original novella. Carpenter found the creepiness of the imitations conducted by the creature and the questions it raised very interesting. Fundamentally, the film is about the erosion of trust in a small community instigated by different forms of paranoia caused by the possibility of someone not being who they say they are, or that your best friend may be your enemy. The theme remains timely because the subject of paranoia adapts through the ages and entire institutions, and is featured in other films like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, another great horror film. Our final film on this list is a film we feel is a perfect example of the suburban haunted house picture, 1982's Poltergeist, directed by Tobe Hooper and in many scenes, Steven Spielberg. The origin of Poltergeist can be traced back to Night Skies, which Spielberg conceived as a horror sequel to his 1977 film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Hooper was less interested in sci-fi elements and suggested they collaborate on a ghost story. Accounts differ as to the level of Spielberg's involvement, but it is clear that he was frequently on set during filming and exerted significant creative control. Now, one of the in-camera effects that Poltergeist uses has become a staple of Steven Spielberg. When Diane goes upstairs trying to save Robbie and Carol Ann, it can be seen how the corridor seems to extend itself to infinity. It is a cinematic technique called retro zoom, dolly zoom, Zolly, and vertigo effect. The technique combines a backward zoom with a forward dolly, or in reverse, a forward zoom with a backward dolly. By compensating for the two effects, the main object remains the same size in the frame, but the perspective with which the background is seen is changed. The vertigo effect name comes from Alfred Hitchcock's thriller, Vertigo, from 1958. Other great haunted house films to check out: The Haunting, 1963, The Legends of Hell House, 1973, and of course, The Amityville Horror, 1979. Well, that's our list for this year's ICS Halloween special. These are only a small portion of very influential films that we feel as an up-and-coming filmmaker you should watch. We hope you learned something new, saw something that you loved, or got inspired to get off your couch and go make a movie of your own. Who knows, it might be good enough for screen on the next Indie Cinema Showcase. Don't forget to follow us on our socials: Facebook at ICS TV, Instagram at ICS TV Show, and YouTube at Indie Cinema Showcase. And of course, if you want a chance to have you, your work, event, convention, or film festival featured on ICS, send us an email at icstv@yahoo.com. Until then, the set is closed, and as they say in the movie business, that's a wrap. See you next time.